Imagine you are a German Panzer commandant in 1943. You are not just a soldier, you are a modern-day knight, a feudal lord roaming the battlefield in a castle of steel. Your machine, whether it's a battle-hardened Panzer IV or one of the new, fearsome Panthers, is the undisputed king of land warfare. From the commander's cupola of your tank, you look out upon the world with a sense of profound, unshakable superiority. Your world is a symphony of power, the deep, throaty rumble of the Maybach engine, the metallic clatter of the tracks, the satisfyingly smooth traverse of the turret. Your 75mm cannon can kill from a mile away. Your thick, sloped armor can shrug off the enemy's pathetic anti-tank rifles like pebbles. You look at the infantry, the poor, soft-skinned Lanzer on your own side and the terrified GIs on the other, and you feel a mixture of pity and contempt. They are ants. They are fragile creatures of flesh and bone, scurrying in the dirt, utterly helpless before your mechanical might. Their machine guns are an annoyance. Their rifles are irrelevant. Their grenades are a joke. An infantryman's only hope against you is to get suicidally close with a clumsy satchel charge, a feat that almost never happens. You are safe in your steel shell. You are protected. You are the predator, and everything else on the battlefield is the prey. This is not arrogance. It is a simple, proven fact of modern warfare. The tank is king, and you are its master. And then, one day, in the dense, claustrophobic hedgerows of Normandy, everything changes. Your column is advancing cautiously. You are scanning for the telltale glint of an anti-tank gun, the only threat you truly respect. Suddenly, from a simple bush, not 50 yards away, there is a strange whoosh, a flash of fire. There is no loud cannon report. It is a sound you have never heard before. A split second later, the Sherman tank in front of you, a machine you know is flawed but is still a 30-ton chunk of American steel, is rocked by a violent explosion. A neat, small hole appears in its side armor, glowing cherry red. A plume of black smoke begins to pour from its hatches. Your blood runs cold. What was that? It wasn't an anti-tank gun. It wasn't a mine. It came from the infantry, from an ant. An ant has just killed a tank. You have just met the M1 Bazooka. You have just witnessed the moment your castle walls were breached. This is the story of the simple, cheap, and revolutionary weapon that took the power of a cannon and gave it to the common foot soldier. It is the story of the weapon that German panzer crews believed was impossible, until it turned every ditch, every window, and every bush into their potential grave.
To truly grasp the psychological earthquake the bazooka caused, you must first understand the absolute, unquestioned dominance of the tank in the first half of the Second World War. The German Blitzkrieg, the lightning war that had conquered Poland, France, and half of Europe, was built on the back of the Panzer. The tank was the spearhead, the breakthrough weapon. It was a self-contained force of destruction, combining mobility, protection, and firepower in a way that was revolutionary. The German Panzer divisions, working in concert with their Stuka dive bombers, were a force of nature that no army had been able to stop. The men who crewed these machines, the Panzertruppen, developed a unique and powerful sense of invincibility. Inside their steel beasts, they were insulated from the filth and terror of the infantryman's war. They were masters of their domain. An infantryman's greatest fear was a machine gun nest. A tanker's greatest fear was another, bigger tank. They lived in a different world, a world of armor and high-velocity shells. And in this world, the lowly infantryman was an afterthought. The standard anti-tank weapons available to the average soldier at the start of the war were frankly pathetic. The British had the Boys anti-tank rifle, a massive, heavy rifle that had a vicious recoil and was famously nicknamed the elephant gun. It could barely penetrate the armor of a pre-war light tank, and it was utterly useless against the Panzer IIIs and IVs of 1940. Other nations had similar, equally ineffective weapons. The only way for an infantryman to reliably kill a tank was through what was essentially a suicide mission. It involved getting incredibly close to the tank, often by hiding in a foxhole and letting it drive over you, and then attaching a sticky bomb, a grenade covered in adhesive, or a magnetic mine to its thinner rear or top armor. Or it involved a desperate mad dash with a heavy satchel charge. These were acts of incredible bravery, but they were not a doctrine. They were last-ditch, desperate measures. The German Panzer crews knew this. They knew that as long as they kept moving and had their own infantry support to keep the enemy grunts at bay, they were virtually untouchable. They could roll through enemy positions with impunity, their machine guns chattering, their main cannons blasting away strong points. The battlefield belonged to them. This created a profound tactical and psychological problem for the Allies. As America prepared to enter the war, its top military minds were desperately searching for a solution. How do you give the individual soldier, the man on the ground, the power to fight back? How do you turn the prey into a predator? They needed a weapon that was light enough for one man to carry, simple enough for a hastily trained GI to operate, and powerful enough to kill a German tank. It was a weapon that did not exist, but it was about to be invented, almost by accident.
The story of the bazooka is not a story of a massive government-funded research project. It is a story of American ingenuity, of tinkering in basements and on firing ranges. The breakthrough came from two separate, seemingly unrelated technological developments. The first was the rocket motor. For years, a Swiss inventor and the American Colonel Leslie Skinner had been working on solid-fuel rocket propulsion. By the early 1940s, they had developed a small, stable, and relatively powerful rocket motor. The second, and far more important development, was the shaped charge, or HEAT, High Explosive Anti-Tank Round. This was a revolutionary concept, pioneered by a Swiss inventor named Henry Mohaupt.
A shaped charge works on a principle that seems like magic. A conventional explosion dissipates its energy in all directions. But a shaped charge, with its cone-shaped hollow in the front, focuses the entire force of the explosion into a single, narrow, superheated jet of molten metal and gas. This jet, traveling at over 25,000 feet per second, does not punch through armor. It melts through it, creating a tiny hole through which it injects a catastrophic amount of energy, killing the crew and igniting ammunition. The beauty of the shaped charge was that its penetrating power had nothing to do with the speed of the projectile. A heat round could be stationary and still have the same effect. The U.S. Army, recognizing its potential, had developed a small heat grenade, the M10. But it had a problem. It was too heavy, over 3 pounds, to be safely and accurately thrown by an infantryman. It was also too powerful to be fired from a standard rifle grenade launcher. They had a war-winning projectile, but no way to deliver it. The Eureka moment came in 1942 at the Aberdeen Proving Ground. A young Army Lieutenant, Edward Ull, was tasked with demonstrating the M10 grenade. Knowing it was too heavy to throw, he had a moment of inspiration. He saw a pile of junk, and in it a simple 5-foot-long scrap metal tube. On a whim, he and Colonel Skinner attached the M10 grenade to one of their small rocket motors, creating a fin-stabilized rocket. They then used the scrap tube as a rudimentary launcher, a simple channel to guide the rocket in the right direction. A captured German tank was used as a target. Ull rested the tube on his shoulder. An NCO loaded the rocket into the back, and they improvised a simple ignition system using the trigger from a discarded pistol. Ull pulled the trigger. There was a whoosh, a cloud of smoke, and the rocket shot across the field, slamming into the tank's turret. There was a bright flash, and a plume of smoke poured from the hole in the armor. The generals who were observing the test were stunned into silence. They had just witnessed a revolution. A single 24-year-old lieutenant, using a weapon improvised from a scrap heap, had just done what previously required a massive anti-tank cannon. He had given the foot soldier the power to kill a tank. The weapon was rushed into production with incredible speed. It was officially designated the Launcher Rocket Anti-Tank M1, but it quickly earned a universal nickname. During a demonstration, one of the observing generals remarked that the strange-looking tube resembled a bizarre homemade musical instrument used by the popular radio comedian Bob Burns. The instrument was called a bazooka. The name stuck. The bazooka was born.
The first combat use of the bazooka was during Operation Torch, the Allied invasion of North Africa in late 1942. The results were immediate and dramatic. Small teams of American soldiers were able to ambush and destroy German Panzer III and IVs, much to the shock of their crews. But it was in the dense, claustrophobic hedgerow country of Normandy in the summer of 1944 that the bazooka truly came into its own and became the German tanker's worst nightmare. The hedgerows of Normandy were a tanker's hell, a maze of small sunken roads and thick, ancient earthen walls covered in impenetrable bushes.
Engagements were at point-blank range. It was a landscape designed for ambushes. For the German Panzer divisions, accustomed to the wide open spaces of the Eastern Front, where they could use their long-range cannons to devastating effect, this was a new and terrifying kind of war. And for the American GI, the bazooka was the perfect weapon for this environment. Imagine the scene from the perspective of a German Panther crew. You are buttoned up, moving cautiously down a narrow, sunken lane. Your commander is scanning the hedgerows, his eyes straining to see through the thick foliage. You feel relatively safe. Your thick frontal armor can shrug off anything the Americans can throw at you. Your only real fear is an M10 tank destroyer, but you haven't seen any. Suddenly, from a dense bush not 40 yards away, there is a flash and a puff of smoke, a sound like a bottle rocket, a high-pitched whoosh. Before you can even process the sound, there is a violent metallic clang as something hits your turret. The shaped charge doesn't penetrate the Panther's thick frontal armor, but the impact is deafening. It has announced the presence of an enemy you cannot see. Your commander screams orders. The turret begins its slow traverse. The co-driver opens up with the hull machine gun, spraying the hedgerow with bullets. But you are firing blind. The bazooka team, a mere 2 men, have already dropped their launcher and vanished back into the dense undergrowth, ready to pop up and fire from a new location 50 yards down the road. This was the new reality for the German Panzerwaffe. The battlefield, which they had once dominated, was now filled with invisible threats. Every hedgerow, every ruined farmhouse, every upper-story window in a village could be hiding a 2-man team with a magic tube that could kill them. The German soldiers, with their penchant for descriptive nicknames, quickly gave the bazooka a name of their own. They called it the Ofenrohr, the stovepipe. The name was a mixture of contempt for its crude, simple appearance and a deep and growing respect for its lethality. The psychological impact was enormous. The tank, once a mobile fortress, now felt like a vulnerable, rolling target. The German tankers, who once advanced with confidence, now did so with a creeping, paranoid dread. They began to rely heavily on their own infantry to screen them, to sweep the hedgerows and clear the buildings before they would advance. The weapon had not only given the American infantry a way to fight back, it had fundamentally changed the tactical relationship between tanks and infantry on the battlefield. The ants had developed a deadly sting.
Perhaps the greatest testament to the bazooka's terrifying effectiveness was the German reaction to it. The German military, for all its flaws, was not stupid. They were masters of battlefield innovation, and when they encountered a new weapon that worked, they were not too proud to copy it. German troops first captured examples of the American M1 bazooka in North Africa, and then in larger numbers on the Eastern Front, where they were being supplied to the Soviet Army via the Lend-Lease program. German engineers at the Ordnance Company WASAG were given the captured stovepipes and a simple set of orders: figure out how it works and build us a better one. The German engineers were reportedly shocked and impressed. They were shocked by the weapon's simplicity and crude construction,
but they were deeply impressed by the elegant and deadly physics of its shaped charge rocket. They quickly reverse-engineered the design, but being German engineers, they couldn't resist improving it. They increased the caliber of the rocket from 60 millimeters to 88 millimeters, the same caliber as their legendary anti-aircraft and anti-tank gun. This much larger warhead had far greater penetration power, capable of defeating the armor of any Allied tank on the battlefield, including the heavily armored British Churchill and the new up-armored versions of the Sherman. They also improved the rocket motor, giving it a longer range. The result was the Panzerschreck, or rocket armor rifle, but everyone knew it by its far more terrifying and descriptive nickname, the Panzerschreck, the tank terror. The Panzerschreck was, in essence, a bazooka on steroids. It was bigger, heavier, and far more powerful. Its one major drawback was that its rocket motor was so powerful that it produced a massive backblast of hot gas and debris, which could severely burn the operator. To solve this, the Germans added a large, distinctive blast shield to the launcher, giving the weapon its iconic and intimidating appearance. The deployment of the Panzerschreck in 1944 created a new kind of terror for Allied tankers. But more importantly, its very existence was a profound admission of defeat by the German High Command. The masters of the Panzerwaffe, the believers in the religion of steel, had been so thoroughly terrified by a simple American stovepipe that they had been forced to copy it and create their own. It was the sincerest and most deadly form of flattery. The battlefield was now saturated with these people's cannons on both sides. The age of the tank's undisputed dominance over the infantrymen was officially over.
By the time of the Battle of the Bulge in the winter of 1944, the transformation of the battlefield was complete. The bazooka was now a ubiquitous part of every American infantry squad. The GIs had become proficient and deadly tank hunters. They developed new tactics, forming bazooka teams that would work together to ambush German armor. They learned to aim for the tank's weak spots, the thinner side and rear armor, the engine deck, the tracks, and the suspension. The German tankers, in turn, were forced to adapt. The days of confidently rolling through enemy territory were long gone. They now lived with a constant, gnawing fear of the unseen threat. Every advance was a slow, nerve-wracking crawl. They knew that behind every tree, in every snow-filled ditch, a GI could be waiting with a 2-foot tube that could end their lives in a flash of molten steel. The German response was a physical manifestation of their fear. They began to weld extra steel plates, known as Schürzen or skirts, onto the sides of their tanks and assault guns. These thin plates of spaced armor were designed specifically to defeat shaped charges. The idea was that the bazooka rocket would detonate prematurely on the thin outer skirt, and the focused jet of metal would dissipate its energy in the empty space before it could reach the tank's main armor. This was a direct tactical evolution driven entirely by the threat of the bazooka and other HEAT weapons. The hunter had forced the beast to grow a new, thicker hide.
The stories of individual heroism involving the bazooka are legendary. Audie Murphy, America's most decorated soldier, used a bazooka to single-handedly stalk and destroy a German self-propelled gun that was tearing his company apart. In countless small, unrecorded skirmishes across Europe, individual GIs, armed with nothing but their courage and a bazooka, stood their ground against advancing panzers and saved their platoons from being overrun. The bazooka was not a perfect weapon. It was often inaccurate, especially in the hands of a nervous soldier. Its backblast was enormous, revealing the firer's position instantly, and its effectiveness against the frontal armor of the heavy Panther and Tiger tanks was questionable. But that was not the point. The point of the bazooka was not that it could win every fight. The point was that it gave the infantryman a chance. It leveled the playing field. It transformed the psychological dynamic of the battlefield. Before the bazooka, the relationship between a tank and an infantryman was that of a boot to an ant. After the bazooka, it was the relationship of a lion to a man with a spear. The lion was still bigger, stronger, and more powerful, but now the man could kill the lion, and that changed everything.
The legacy of the bazooka is far greater than the sum of the tanks it destroyed. Its true impact was psychological and doctrinal. It was the weapon that democratized anti-tank warfare. It took the immense power required to kill a tank out of the hands of specialized artillery and tank destroyer crews and placed it directly into the hands of the common foot soldier. The German Panzer crews, who began the war with a feeling of godlike invincibility, ended it with a feeling of constant, hunted paranoia. Their castles of steel had been proven vulnerable, not by a bigger castle, but by the smallest and most numerous of their enemies. Their religion of armor had been shattered by a simple, heretical idea that one man with the right tool could defeat a monster. The bazooka and its descendants, like the Soviet RPG, would go on to define the nature of infantry combat for the rest of the 20th century and beyond. But it was in the forests and fields of Europe, in the hands of the American GI, that this pipe dream of a weapon first proved its devastating potential. It is a testament to its power that the Germans, the masters of military engineering, were so thoroughly shaken by it that their only response was to copy it. It was a weapon so effective, it forced the enemy to admit that their own philosophy was no longer enough. The German tankers, who felt invincible in their panzers, had learned a brutal lesson. The most dangerous thing on the battlefield was no longer another tank. It was a single, determined soldier, hidden in a ditch with a simple metal tube resting on his shoulder. The king was dead. Long live the tank hunter.